till I can't no more.
I got the horses in the bag. Horse stock is attached.
Hi everyone and welcome to Prowler 36. Today's video will be theorizing about villains who could show up in Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. They could be brand new villains or villains that have appeared in Spider-Man PS4 to show up in the upcoming Miles Morales game. Before we begin, I just want to say that none of those villains are confirmed and we are yet to receive any type of gameplay of the game to even get a better idea what kind of villains Miles will be dealing with in his very own game. So I thought, why not speculate some of the villains that could appear and may have even gotten glimpses of in the trailer. In one of my other videos, I talked about how we could potentially see Rhino in the game. Since in Spider-Man PS4, there was a mission where we were hiding from Rhino as Miles. I talked about how it would be awesome if we actually got to face Rhino in the game, but this time with actual superpowers and this time just fighting head on. I think it would be a missed opportunity if Insomniac didn't take this into consideration, as it would pretty much come full circle for Miles and Rhino. Not to mention, the two were also close in the comics too. One character I think a lot of people want in either Miles Morales PS5 or the next Spider-Man 2 game is Kraven the Hunter. We don't know if he exists in this universe yet, however, sooner or later Insomniac will have to show the character, whether in Peter's very own game or in Miles Morales' game. I think it would be a perfect opportunity to bring him over into Miles' game, and then we could see him later in the future when he faces Peter. Maybe he faces Miles because he's an inexperienced Spider-Man, so Kraven would see him as some kind of test to see if he's ready to face the actual experienced Spider-Man, Peter Parker. I think that would be very interesting. Not to mention, I think Taskmaster would also be a character who I could see return, since he was tasked to see if Peter Parker was ready to be hired by an organization, which we don't know who it is, so maybe he'll be tasked to see if Miles can be recruited. Even though I could see other characters who showed up in Spider-Man PS4 to appear in Miles' game, I think it would also be a wise decision to add new characters that we haven't seen before. In the trailer, we see a female character who pretty much is able to create weapons out of thin air and is surrounded by some kind of pink or purple energy, which may or may not be linked to the Prowler. However, one theory I saw, it could be Cardiac, who's not really a known Spider-Man villain. However, there's a good chance that they could have gender bended the role and actually make him female in this universe. We also have hints towards him in the game, so there's possible signs that he does exist in this universe. I think somebody like Cardiac would not only be a great decision to put him in Spider-Man PS4, but also, you know, see how Miles would be able to deal with that kind of villain since he's been Spider-Man for about a year. I think a villain like Omega Red would be a perfect villain for Miles Morales PS5. And the reason why I say that is because in the comics, Omega Red was one of the first villains Miles has faced as Spider-Man. He was also a villain who faced Ultimate Peter Parker before he died, and actually thought that Miles Morales was Peter Parker, just in a different costume. I think somebody like him, even though he's not really a Spider-Man villain, would be perfect for the game. We do have Taskmaster, who isn't really a Spider-Man villain but has faced Spider-Man in the comics, so why not do the same for Omega Red, who actually did face Miles in the infancy of his career as Spider-Man. Another villain I can also see showing up is Kangaroo. Kangaroo was I believe the first villain Miles has faced when he put on the Halloween version of Peter Parker's costume, which was in poor taste at the time. And the first time he actually fought a supervillain with his powers was Kangaroo. So having him as one of the boss battles would not only be a neat reference to his earlier beginnings in the comics, but also, as I mentioned before, a great test of who Miles has become right now, how he's able to deal with a villain like that in his first year of being Spider-Man. I think that would be awesome and also create very interesting gameplay. If they were to introduce somebody like Katie Bishop as Miles Morales' love interest, I think there's a good chance they could hint towards her Hydra background in the comics. However, I don't think Miles Morales PS5 would deal with Hydra, as that is a massive organization in the comics, and not to mention they are mainly Captain America and Avengers type enemies. Spider-Man has faced them a few times, specifically Peter Parker and obviously Miles. However, I don't think, going by the synopsis of this game, I don't think they will be able to deal with Hydra. We know in the synopsis that Miles has to deal with a gang and a corporation going at war, so I think there's a good chance that Roxxon could be involved, or even Oscorp as the organizations, and the gang members could be led by the Prowler or even Tombstone, and it would be a perfect opportunity to bring in Tombstone or even his daughter. I think another character who we can see Miles face is a character called Starling, which her real name is Tiana Toombs, and if that sounds familiar, it's because she's the granddaughter of Adrian Toombs, the Vulture. We know that Adrian exists in this universe, we actually faced him in the first game, so wouldn't it be interesting if we actually face his granddaughter as Miles Morales? I think not only that would be interesting, but also somewhat raise the stakes and be personal for us as the players. Maybe not to Miles, because Miles hasn't faced Vulture as far as we know. So yeah, it would be interesting to see if this iteration of the Vulture has had a granddaughter he doesn't really know about, or his granddaughter who's trying to follow into her grandfather's footsteps. I can see this being a side mission, as it would create an interesting side story for not only Miles but also for the character too. I can also see somebody like Tombstone show up as well, going back to existing characters that we've seen before. And the reason why I say that is because I believe Miles has faced Tombstone in the comics, and not only would that be interesting, but also if he actually faced his daughter, who's an iteration of the Beetle. So if we have both of those characters, or even one of them, I think not only would that be interesting, but also expand the Spider-Man universe even further in this universe. I think this has potential in both gameplay and storytelling. And last but certainly not least, the Prowler, Miles Morales' uncle, Aaron Davis. We know Aaron Davis exists because his name was mentioned on TV after Miles fixed it for Ernie, and there's a chance that we may have actually seen Prowler, or at least a glimpse of him, in the trailer too. When you slow down in the bit where Miles is jumping from police car to police car, we see somewhat of a purple streak, which looks a lot like Prowler from Into the Spider-Verse. So could they be doing something similar to this iteration of the character? I wouldn't be surprised. Prowler has always been Miles Morales' most popular villain, and also definitely his most personal one, as that is his uncle. And I've said this many times, it would be interesting to see how he dealt with Jefferson's death and how this could possibly affect this version of Miles Morales. I believe there was also behind the scenes footage of the actor who voices Miles mentioning Mr. Davis, so I think there's a huge chance that we could expect Aaron Davis, if not definitely, as when you think of Miles Morales' enemy, he's pretty much the first person you think of, at least for me. However, which villains do you definitely think will show up in Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and one more subscribe to begin Protocol 36.